We are not Eskom, we don't work for Eskom. There's no reason why our legal fees should be paid by them. We are a fund that looks after the interest of the fund and the interest of the members and the pensioners of the fund. Therefore, why would they want to pay for us? So from that point of view, I thought it was not ethically correct to accept money from them without understanding the motive behind it, because we've always paid our own legal fees.
I'm very glad to hear that you have such a strong ethical standing. My question then to you, Madam Chairperson of the Board, ethically, do you think that it was knowing that Eskom is a state-owned entity, knowing that the money for the buy-in for the 13 years for Mr. Brian Molefe was going to come from a company, a state-owned entity that belongs to all South Africans, a massive amount of money that will enrich one South African as opposed to being used to electrify and provide electricity for thousands, in fact millions of South Africans across the country. You still, given what you've told me about your ethical standing, maintain that you did not see an ethical obligation to report that there might be something corrupt about this activity?
As a board chairperson and as a board, we did indicate that the board never knew about this until it came out of the newspapers. And when it came out of the newspapers, I informed the board. And we asked all the relevant questions, why? Was the board not told? That is when the delegation that was given to management in 1999 was brought to the board. We further said we further went on to say, but this doesn't make sense, a delegation given to management for such a big issue. And then that's when we went back to the rules and highlighted the discretion, the issue of discretion. And we asked for legal opinion on can a discretion be delegated, and we were told that a discretion cannot be delegated. Hence, we took action and said, in future, such delegation cannot be delegated to anybody else because it's subject to misinterpretation, or such things can happen without being questioned. I still repeat that had it come to the board as a collective would have interrogated this thing and questioned why in such a show, why the calculation came to that amount. The calculation coming to that amount, we know because we have the calculation. But how come?
Okay, great. My last question then, has any disciplinary action been taken against this grouping of management who took it upon themselves to take this decision knowing full well that the discretion lay with the board? Because they took this decision on their own, and you as a board only found out about it, as you say, in the media. So clearly there was a massive failure in corporate governance within your own structures. And has disciplinary action been taken against that management team?
To answer your question, management did not deliberately make the decision. They made the decision on the basis of the delegation of authority given to them. So as a board, we did not discipline anybody because there was a whole full paper trail of why management did that, and they had done it in the past based on the delegation of authority that was given to them.
Right.
So
I'm sorry, I'm running out of time, so I'm going to stop you short. My final question, who delegated that management team to act in this way?
It was the board in 1999.
Thank you, Honorable Malzone. Honorable Swart.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I do understand that much of what we've been presented today and the decisions that were taken was on the basis of information that Eskom furnished you. Now, you've also said you've learned a lot of lessons out of this process. So it starts with the information you got in the leg file relating to the employment contract, which appears to be incorrect because it was a fixed term contract and not a full contract of employment. So it seems that going forward, you're going to have to recheck and research every bit of information you get from Eskom as the Eskom pension fund. You can't rely on the information that you get in. Because had you have just asked for the contract, you would have seen the contract, I've got it here, says a fixed term contract. And that would have been the end of the matter. So I think one can learn lessons, but to me, it's a straightforward issue that you should get the contracts of employment as a pension fund. But I do want to also state that the pension fund industry in general, what is happening here is where people buy back pension. I mean, we are faced with this in Parliament with other matters. I'm on the Justice Portfolio Committee where we saw the golden handshakes that are being paid to people, such as Mr. Nkosana, the previous NDPP, and there's a lot of questions around these issues. So in those cases, it's golden handshakes. In this case, it seems to have been to get rid of people. Here it is to benefit a specific issue. So this is an issue that we need to be aware of. There are rules that apply for that, and you rely on those rules. But at the heart of your problem is the governmental issue relating to 28.5, and that is your, sorry, 28.3, and that's the delegation of a discretion. Now, I'm astounded that you should have, as a board and management, have allowed a discretion to be delegated, because you've got specifics here, 28, Rule 28, that allows for a deviation, an early retirement, and massive funds. But the caveat, the check and balance is there. The board may apply. So it must be taken at a board level. So whilst that decision, the delegation that went down earlier, prior to your time, but surely it should have been questioned. Why only right at the September of this year is it for the first time that a legal opinion is obtained on that issue, which to me is so straightforward? A discretion cannot be delegated. Have you got any explanation for that?
I think, as indicated, that obviously out of this whole issue, we've learned as well. So we have to accept that there was a delegation that was in place. I think there was no reason to question that delegation. It had been applied. It had been applied successfully in the past. I think now, with all these issues that have emerged, it was only proper to really now, firstly, sought legal opinion, because these are not easy issues. Not all of us are legal, expertise. Hence why the board insisted that we need to get legal opinion to understand whether was it correct in the first place to delegate discretion. And we now know better that this should not have happened. And importantly, the board took immediate corrective action to actually then revoke that delegation, that in all the rules, anything that has to do with discretion needs to now be presented to the board from that point onwards. I think you also raised the issue around the contracts of employment. I think it's actually going to be, it may be a challenge, because this is something that we have to engage with Eskom in terms of what information we can access. I think you need to recall there's about 46,000 active employees, and every month there's movement. There's people that leave Eskom, there's people that join Eskom. So the fund is not capacitated to be able to now interrogate each document. I think there needs to be more closer correlation between what happens at Eskom and the information that they give to the fund. Again, we've started processes, and one of the steps that we've already taken is to go back to Eskom and write to them to say to them, look, there is this issue around the eligibility of Molefe. Can you go through your records and check whether there is any other fixed-term contractors or fixed-term contract employees which you've categorized as permanent employees? And Eskom is currently going through a process of actually checking that. So I think going forward, we need to establish more closer cooperation and more, closer interaction in terms of making sure that these errors do not occur.
Thank you. You make the assumption that the previous ones were correctly done, but we don't know that. And your board won't know it because the discretion was delegated down. One assumes that, but you see, the board might be interested in that regard as well. But the other point is you might limit your contracts that you ask for the top-level executives where there's a high turnover and where there's a lot of pension money involved, but that is just a suggestion. What I wanted to ask you, had the Sunday Times on the 16th of April not disclosed this issue, and had the other newspapers, Daily Maverick, you referred to them, 17th of July, had they not disclosed this issue, would it have gone ahead? Because it seems that what you've told us is that the rules were complied with as far as you're concerned correctly, you'd got information, and the payment was continuing. So had it not been in the media, it would have continued. Is that my correct understanding?
It is correct, because we would have not had access to that information, and we would not have known better.
And had the minister, did the minister at any time liaise with you?
No.
And so at the time the minister issued her objection to that was, besides the media, it was also when she indicated she was objecting to that payout. Is that correct as well? The 30 million.
I can only comment from what I read in the media. I do not, we as a fund have no direct communication with the minister. So we only read what was being cited in the media as well.
And so from what you've learned so far, and we've got a lengthy document from you, but just the figure, I just wanted to get an understanding. Is it correct it's around 9 million that was paid to Mr. Molefe, and he's repaying that? And is he paying it to the pension fund or to Eskom? And if so, what is the arrangement for that repayment? The figure might not, it's not important, but just the principle of the matter.
Maybe let me just go back a little bit. When Mr. Molefe was reinstated to Eskom, we received correspondence from Eskom reiterating that we should suspend paying him pension. Attached to that, we were advised that he's now been reinstated. We were also advised that he was on unpaid leave. Attached to that, there was also, a statement. I can't remember whether it was a separate agreement or it was included in that letter, where they indicated that they had agreed with him that he will pay back the monies by November 2017. Then there was this court process that started. So everything is now stopped, subject to the outcome of the court process. So as we stand now, Mr. Molefe has not paid back any money. The fund has not paid Eskom its money, so the fund received 30.1 million. It paid out about 9.7 million to Molefe as a one-third lump sum. It also paid him monthly pensions. So we are holding back in the region of about 20 million of this amount that is being held in the fund until this whole court process is complete and there's an outcome. And based on that outcome, if we have to seek legal advice in terms of how to process the matter, we will do that.
And I am grateful for the information that you've furnished, bearing in mind that it is subject to a court process as well. So, Chair, those are my questions from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honorable Shivambu.
No, thank you very much, Chairperson. You started by giving us the broad overview of the fund. What is the actual size of the Eskom Pension and Provident Fund in terms of rand value?
As we stand now, we are in the region of about 143 billion rands.
143 billion rands. And then you said some of the assets are internally managed. Who manages externally some of the assets? Who are the major asset managers of the Eskom Pension Fund?
The list is endless. We do disclose the list even in our annual report. I can provide the list in terms of who are the external managers if that is required. That information is available. We can make it available.
I'm interested, Chair, in the who are the external managers of the Eskom Pension and Provident Fund, because we wrote a letter to Transnet, and it's a separate issue, about who are the external managers of the Transnet fund. It has got a long name. And then the principal officer there responded that part of the monies they give to Regiment Capital, which then transferred the money to Trillion Capital and a company called Albert Time. I think about 228 million rands of that, and which they realized there was illegality in the transfers of those monies, which they are trying to reclaim. As part of those external fund managers, do you have got regiments or trillion or Albertine capital from the Eskom pension fund?
I can confirm that none of those manage our assets externally.
But you later on give you later on give us the list of who are the external managers of the Eskom pension fund.
Yes, we will submit a list.
I think that will be adequate. And you said you have been working at the Eskom pension fund since 2010.
That is correct.
And then when you were telling us about the commencement date of Brian Molife's employment, you say that the documents either indicate that it's either the 14th of September or 24th September or 1st October. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct, that the information that we received with the leg file indicated a date of 14 September as the start date, so which is the date he became a member of the fund. Further on,
okay, yes.
Further on, when he then submitted his forms, he indicated a date of 25 September as a start-on date. Then later on, when we eventually got sight of court papers where his employment contract was contained, when we looked at the date, it indicated
Sound and vision, can you come back again?
So I was just completing that. Further on, when we got access to the contract, we noted that there was a date of 1 October as the start date.
I suspect these disruptions is those microphones of NN7s. We might have to remove them here, and then there will definitely be peace in terms
Order,
of
order.
and when he received the 7 million, which he said was a third of the amount, when was that? It was in February 2016.
Yes, it was sometime in February 2016. Sorry, 2017.
2017,
Yes.
yes. So that was it's from October 2015 to February 2017. How many months is that?
I think we need to count the months he had worked. He had worked about 16 months, okay, which ended on the 31st of December. Then after that, when he submitted an application, there's an administrative process which involves applying for the tax directive. So when he was paid in February, we had to back pay him from the 1st of January. So the delay was an administrative delay.
And then you said that you then were requested to use Section 28 or Rule 28 to then buy the additional services of the years up until his retirement. But then Section 28 was not applicable because he had not served for more than 10 years. Is that correct?
It is correct, which is why they then invoked Rule 21.4 to buy the additional service.
What does Rule 21.4 say?
Sorry, I'll find it now and read it.
But the essence of it, the essence of Rule 21.4, what is it?
The essence of it is that it allows the employer to buy additional future service, additional service for a member. That is
Has Rule 21.4 been used before?
Yes, it has been used before.
In what circumstances? What was the years of service of the people where Rule 21.4 was utilized before?
The years of service would vary from each individual, so it's a little bit difficult to...
But has it been like 16 months or 24 months or 60 months? Or what is the illustration?
I would have to go and check the records to then be able to give an answer. I think this issue also relates to the Rule 35 issue that I had raised concern around, that there is a court process where this Rule 35 has been applied, and we would need to seek legal advice in terms of how much we can disclose before the court process is finalized.
But as the principal officer, I'm sure you will know that the 16 months could have been the highest number or the lowest number of a service that had been served by a person to apply Rule 21(4). Was that the lowest amount of service where that has been utilized, where you ended up paying huge pension to a person because you had to buy them out through 21(4)? I'm sure you will recall that if you had paid someone at a senior executive level, millions of rands, I'm sure that will ring into your head. Do you recall any specific event where you had utilized the Rule 21(4) to buy anyone out of service?
Where specifically I think your question is
where specifically 21(4) was utilized?
So you're trying to ask the minimum number of years?
Yeah, like particularly in relation to the number of years that the person had served.
I think it's a little bit difficult for me to speculate. As indicated, I think that information we can definitely go and check in terms of what would have been the minimum number other than Mr. Molefe, and then submit that information.
But here's a situation that it applies, doesn't Rule 28 applies to the executives, like mostly? I thought it does. And where the board takes, or Eskom, the employer takes a specific resolution to say that we are not going to utilize 28 because this person has not served 10 years. We're using 21(4) as a special circumstance. I'm sure that could ring in your head where you ended up having to pay tens of millions of rands to an individual. Has that happened before Brian Molefe was an employee of Eskom?
The Rule 28 has not only been used for executives. Eskom has also invoked Rule 28 for other employees. Hence, I'm suggesting and proposing that we will go and look at the records of all the employees, and we can indicate what the minimum number, other than Mr. Molefe's number of years, is.
That's fine. And then he said later on there was a letter from Ben Ngubane. What was the letter about? After Brian Molefe had left Parliament, what was the letter saying? It said he was in a long leave, or can you please give me the context of that letter he spoke about leave from Mr. Ben Ngubane?
We'll look for the letter, and we can then read the contents of the letter.
I'm interested in that because I'm interested also in your reaction to a letter that suggested that actually you must stop paying pensions to this person because, or the monthly pension to this person because he had taken a long unpaid leave. What became your reaction when you were informed that he took a long unpaid leave?
I will get the exact letters, but I think we wrote back to them trying to establish in terms of what is actually the status of Mr. Molefe, because at that point we were very confused.
Which part of the letter would you like to know?
I'm interested on the leave component. After Brian Molefe had come to Parliament, and then he resigned, and then Dr. Ngubane then wrote you a letter. What was the letter saying?
It says here.
Okay, I've got the document. Shall I go through?
Yes.
In fact, the document is an agreement. It says reinstatement agreement between Eskom Holdings SOC and Brian Molefe.
Okay.
then the letter goes on. I'll focus only on the relevant aspects
Yes.
of it. It first talks about resumption of duties. It says Molefe shall resume his duties in terms of the principal agreement on 15 May 2017. Eskom shall take all administrative steps necessary to give effect to this agreement. Then it talks about repayment of monies by Molefe to the fund. Molefe agrees to pay to the fund all monies due to the fund which were paid to him pursuant to the retirement agreement by no later than 30 November 2017. It then talks about the period between 1 January 2017 to 15 May 2017. It says the period between 1 January 2017 and 15 May 2017 will be regarded as unpaid leave.
And then what became your response to that?
Honorable member, your time is up.
Can I ask two more questions, Chair?
Just give the others first.
I'll come back to that.
It depends, maybe.
Please, because I wanted to understand that. I would want the principal officer to respond on Anod Singh, who is the CFO of Eskom, who is employed more or less in the same conditions, who was employed more or less in the same conditions as Brian Molefe, because it looks like it's a member of the pension fund. What are the circumstances and what's happening with regards to that?
Thank you for that. Honorable
Welcome back, Sean.
No Banda.
Thank you, Chairperson. According to your presentation, Mr. Molefe joined Eskom on 14/9/2014.
That is correct.
2015.
No, it was 14 September 2015.
2015.
Yes.
Yes. And then 25 September is the one cited as employment date.
That was cited as the employment date on his exit form.
On the
Because the
exit
form, there is a space where you need to indicate when you were employed.
Okay. And then the 1st October one?
The 1st October, we learned of it subsequently when we had sight much later of his employment contract that it indicated that he was employed on the 1st of October.
So the 1st of October is the one,
It's the one in his employment contract.
Contract.
Yes.
okay. And then according to your scheme, he was supposed to have been, 55, eligible for pension. Is it 55 or?
There's various rules that are applicable for exit. So there is a rule that allows a member to exit at the age of 55, but there is Rule 28, which allows the member to exit at age 50, subject to the employer agreeing to certain things, which is the rule that was invoked for Mr. Molefe.
For Mr. Molefe. So
Yes.
they use Rule 21(4).
They used a combination of Rule 28 and Rule
21.
21(4). Yes.
For 50 years, not for over 50.
28(3) specifically deals with the issue of age of 50 years.
Okay.
It further on deals with the issue that he must have at least a minimum of 10 years service. In order to overcome that, that is when Rule 21(4) was invoked to buy him additional service.
Okay. Now this spousal, I'm very interested in this spousal. I don't know what you call this spousal, where your spouse is younger, the money goes up, older, it goes down. Is that what you are saying?
Yes. When we do the calculations, we make assumptions that you would have a spouse that is 5 years younger than yourself. So those calculations and the actuarial factors that are used assume that. When we do the estimates, when we do the actual calculation, we then have to go and look at the specific spouse, look at the situation itself.
Okay.
In this case where the spouse is more than 5 years younger than the member, that increases the cost because part of the benefit is that you will receive your pension as a member. When you pass away, the rules allow the spouse to then receive pension. So if the spouse is much younger, it means the fund needs to reserve more money to be able to afford to pay the spouse for more years that she would live because she is younger.
If the spouse is older, does it same apply? And does this apply to both female and males? If I were to get an older spouse, if I were to get married now to one of the Eskom executives who is older, I'm weighing my options as we speak now. Does that mean, does it go up or down?
If you are more than 5 years younger, then the cost will be more.
To me or to him?
No, if
Remember, what I'm saying is, if my potential husband at Eskom is an executive and is older than me, it's the same situation as Mr. Molefe. But if it happens that he's younger than me, if I were to get a Ben 10 from Eskom, myself, and I'm not working at Eskom, but my Ben 10 is in Eskom, does that mean, what does that mean for me?
The actuarial factors that will be used will be different, which will, again, it becomes a bit difficult to generalize because it's not only the spouse, but the spouse is one component. There's a number of other components that differ from each individual. So for me to give a blanket answer is very difficult, but I can say that if the age is for the spouse is older, a different factor will be used, which will have a different outcome, and the cost will come down. But there are other issues that you have to factor in mind that each situation is different from the other.
So I must get an older one. Now, according to your calculations, Mr. Molefe came with the 4 million from Transnet. Now, if he didn't have this 4 million, there was no calculation of the spouse, say it was just him, how would the pension look? What would be your rough estimate?
Sure, I don't know. We would have to calculate it. We have not calculated it. If you would like us to...
Yes. Can you speculate whether it was less, it would have been less or more without the Transnet money, without the spouse?
I think the Transnet money does not feature into, yes, it's a separate calculation.
So when you calculated, it was only Eskom's pensions, you did not factor in Transnet?
Yes, I think you remember when I took you through the calculation, I splitted it twice. Firstly, there was the cost of the 30 million, how we came to that, which is the cost of the benefit. Then there was the calculation of the pension. I split the pension into two, and I said there's a statutory pension, which you use certain factors, and there was an amount that came out of that. I then said we did a secondary calculation, which was now the amounts that had come from Transnet. So those amounts stand independently of the statutory pension.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you paid him, what, the 9-point-something million? That money was paid to him?
Yes, that amount was paid to him.
Was he ever required after all these letters to pay it back? And has he paid anything? We're talking about only this 9 million, not calculating the 30s and the what.
I think there was an agreement that I read aspects of now.
That agreement, does it factor the 9-point-something million?
Yes, that agreement was referring to that 9.7 million. But, you know, what was problematic about the agreement was that it was an agreement between Eskom and Molefe. The fund was
not part.
not party to it.
Now, the 111,000 pension per month, it's correct, ne? I'm not mixing the amounts. It's 111 per month.
Yes, I'm rounding the amount off. It's
Yes.
111, and there'll be some rents.
Yes, per month.
Per month,
For
yes.
his pension.
Yes.
Which, according to your presentation, he must have gotten it from the 1st of January 2017.
That is correct.
And on the 12th of May, Mrs. Daniel said you should stop the transactions, the payouts, the pension payouts.
It is correct. What I'm trying to check is, was it exactly the 12th?
You just said
It sounds
you,
correct.
You received a letter from Ms. Daniels on the 12th of May.
It is correct.
Okay. Now, Mr. Molefe received pension then. Let's assume he received the pension from the 1st of January up until May. And according, you are saying he became a pensioner in January, ne? I've written all these dates.
Yes, he became
Yeah.
a pensioner on the 1st of
On the
January.
24th of January, there was an acceptance letter of early retirement request, right? Was it not to you, or was it to Eskom? On the 24th of January.
The information, we would have received it in December from Molefe. I think there was somewhere in December where Mr. Nzibande went to collect documents.
Okay.
Yes.
So on the 11th of November 2016, that's when Mr. Molefe stepped down, resigned, all that thing. Correct.
I'm not sure of the date as to when he stepped down.
Okay, it's fine. According to my records, I'm very good with dates and writing them down. On the 11th of November, that is when he submitted a statement of stepping down, or was it resignation, whatever it was. But afterwards, there was a letter or a statement that said, effective 1st of January 2017. Now, now you are saying between between August 2016, August, September, October, November, December, you were receiving all these correspondences of calculations, correct? Your first letter was from Mr. Anton Menard to calculate early retirement with penalties waived on the 18th of August 2016.
That is correct. We did receive a request via email.
Now, from all these dates, wasn't there any red lights going? That we are calculating, we are getting these requests to calculate pensions and all that in August. November, we are stepping down. And on December, 19 December, we get the exit documents. On the 1st of January, we become pensioners and we start getting payouts of all this money. And 25 May, this is when we are told to stop payment of the pensions. 15 May, we get reinstatement. And on the same 12th, is it 12th of May or no man? On the 12th of May is the same month and same day when Mr. Molefe resigns as Member of Parliament. To me, if I'm sitting here and I'm looking at all these dates as we were putting them, and it says there's something wrong here. All these dates lead me to something else that I don't want to say in front of TV, but the dates are not, they tell a story, and a very different story than what we are getting. Now, if my last question, Chair, is if somebody is being paid pension and at the same time is receiving government salary, what are the legal implications? Because if you're paying him pension on the 1st of January, and he came to Parliament when? February. Oh, yeah, what? February. And he's been getting all this 111. This is even more than what I'm being paid. So, no, I'm saying what we are being paid in Parliament. Like we have a salary and then we have a salary at Eskom. So it means I'm getting 2 salaries. What are the legal implications on that?
I do not know.
But hey, Chair. Okay, from the fund's point of view, perspective, and all that, if your member is supposedly getting a pension, but at the same time is being paid from somewhere else, it doesn't have to be in Eskom again, but from somewhere else, and then later you are told to stop the pension, what are the legal implications?
If a member is, I think I explained that there's various forms of retirement or exit from the fund. So in this instance, there's nothing in the rules that prevent a member who has been retired that way. We don't have any recourse to say we are now paying you pension so you can't earn any other income elsewhere. I'm answering from the fund's point of view. I do not know what other implications are wherever the member may be working and getting an income.
Okay. My last question, Chair. As the fund, you only report to FN?
FSB.
Only FSB. Is that where you take only your reports? There's nothing that you say maybe you must report monthly, quarterly, or whatever, either to Eskom or to the minister or to whoever, apart from FSB.
Yeah. What we are supervised by the FSB, and we do report to the FSB. We submit these regulated reports in terms of the law. What we do as well, because Eskom has got a financial interest in the fund as a contributing employer, on a monthly basis, we send out our financial performance, which is, these are the assets that we have, this is how the assets have performed, because that is important to Eskom as well, because they are a contributing member. They would like to know that the fund is in a healthy financial state. So on a monthly basis, we do send them. The information is limited to the investments, that these are investments we have, these are the returns that we've made. We give them a summary of the returns. That's all that we submit to Eskom on a monthly basis. On an annual basis, we do share the valuation report. We value the fund annually, and the financial statements, we do send them to Eskom.
Do these rules of the fund apply to the lower employees, not just executive? Are these the same rules that would apply even to just your normal general work?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, honorable members. Mr. Lutuli, when you look at your ethical conduct as a fund and your governance issues, do you really see that the governance of this fund is still intact? Because I see it, your governance in the fund, as it's going down, it's collapsing, because some of the general ethical conducts, I mean, you've heard over the radio, Mr. Molefe was either retrenched, retired, what, there is, that has been announced according to Mr. Lefe. Didn't you, as a fund that has an ethical conduct, thought of, there's a game that is being played here, and you then become part of the game that is being played? Because really, in what was coming out of the media and out of everywhere, anybody could have been suspicious beside being a manager in the fund. Wouldn't you be held accountable for a corporate governance within the funding that has collapsed?
Honorable Chair, I do not believe that the governance at the fund has collapsed. I believe the fund has very strong corporate governance principles, very strong corporate governance policies that it follows. In this instance and in every other instance, the fund cannot operate based on media reports. The fund has to receive factual documents. When we received factual documents, there was an application that was very specific. It cited particular rules that Eskom has applied before. It indicated that Eskom was going to carry the costs, and this was signed by the chairperson of the board at Eskom. So on our part, we checked that does this comply with the rules, and there was nothing at that point in time that indicated to us that there is a problem here. We followed all the processes and checks and balances that we would follow as a fund in processing the benefits and making sure that the interests of the fund are protected. It's very difficult for us to comment on the governance processes of Eskom because we do not know the governance processes of Eskom, and I think probably they would be able to then respond accordingly as to what process they followed and what governance they looked at in terms of them approving this. But from our side, we do believe that the governance was followed. Having said that, I think even the chairperson highlighted that I think there is learnings out of all of this process, and we have taken corrective action where we can, but there's also a process to even revisit the rules and look at how we can update the rules such that the rules can be more up to date and be more talk to the real issues of today.
Chair, the first letter you have received from Eskom, what did it say? Did it say Mr. Molefe has retired, Mr. Molefe has resigned, therefore in his resignation you have to do this and that? The first letter that you have received?
Myself or the fund?
Fund, I think you are part of the fund.
The letter that was received from the fund was the letter that Mr. Lutule alluded to earlier on, that indicated that they are retiring Mr. Molefe, and they are applying Rule 28 in conjunction with Rule 21.4. So that was the letter that was sent to Molefe, to the fund by Dr. Ngubane, and also supported by the termination letter that was signed by Mr. Molefe. It said they were retiring him, and they are buying back the pension up to age 63, and also waiving the penalties that could have been instituted to him had he just retired without them buying. So that's the gist of the letter.
So you have never come up, or maybe you are working on papers, because the minister, when she was she heard of the stepping down of Mr. Molefe, she publicly said, "We welcome the resignation of Mr. Molefe." Then, after that, you received a letter from Eskom that says Mr. Molefe has retired. Didn't that alone raise a red light that says, is this person, according to the minister, he has resigned? According to what you have received, it says he has retired. So didn't that raise any questions? You just went to your papers and then you did the calculations according to what is in front of you.
Madam Chair, as you remember, what Mr. Luthuli indicated earlier on was the fact that the board is not operational, number one. The board does not know, has delegated the day-to-day functioning of the fund to management, right? Having done so, when these letters are, the transactions of the letters of termination, resignation, whatever, they go to management, and management, based on that delegation that they were given, process them. It only came to the attention of the fund, was it 16th April? When I received a call from Mr. Luthuli indicating that there is this issue in the bank. So the board only got to know about it when the media, after Mr. Molefe had received his pension from January until April, that's when it came to the attention of the board. So we did not even know the terms of his termination. We just received the information after the fact. And that is why we said, let us interrogate why the board did not know. And that's when we got to realize that there was a delegation, but our lawyers told us that you cannot delegate discretion. You can only delegate the activities to management. So that delegation was an old delegation prior to our time, which was done in 1999. And as a result, as the board, we went through the entire governance framework. We looked at everything, crossed every T. We looked at the delegation of authority for the fund, and we have revisited everything. And whatever was done wrong, we indicated that it will never be delegated again. Now, coming back to when we received the letter. When the letter was received, we were not privy to the letter because it was an operational matter, but it became a board issue when it came out in the media, and then the board had to ask the relevant questions asked.
When Mr. Luthuli responded to one of the questions that was raised by members, he said that you cannot, as the fund cannot rely on what is on the media. That's what he said when he responded in one of the questions. I just cannot remember the questions. Then now you are coming back, you are responding to what you see in the media or what you heard about the media, responding to the very relevant situation that has been taking place in Eskom. That it's a little bit confusing, but you don't have to respond to that. My question is, Mr. Anoj Singh, is he part of the funding?
Mr. Anand Singh is a member of the fund. We have written a letter to Eskom subsequent to us understanding that or knowing that Mr. Molefe was had a limited duration contract. We have written to Eskom requesting them to give us names of people who are members of the fund, but they're not eligible members. We have specifically asked for Mr. Anand Singh as to whether he is a legit a permanent employee. The answer that we got was not satisfactory to us. We subsequently have requested Eskom to give us a contract, his contract of employment. They haven't yet given us his contract of employment. So we are trying to dig down to find out, are there any other people who are on a limited duration contractor whose files we were given as if they were permanent employees. So to answer your question, Mr. Singh is a member of the fund. I'm correct, Mr. Luthuli?
to know if you have a strategy in your institution that would help you to be able, because I'm worried of this institution of yours, because if the fund relies only on what, because it looks like in everybody's eyes that Eskom has actually misled you. Do you have then a strategy that is in place that will make the fund to do the correct payment to the correct person? Because if you keep on relying, I'm just thinking, I was a teacher before I became a member of parliament. I'm just, yes, it's coming to my mind, what if the pension fund that paid my pension in the education system just took what was given to them by the tax spray district office and not make any other research about me? What if that person wrote that I must get the 30 million or whatever? What would have happened to that institution? I think what I want to check with you is the funding relying only on the information that they get from Eskom, and they don't have any plan to look for the correctness, or it has come to your attention now that you need to have to look for further information if this has happened to you and you did not know anything about it.
Madam Chair, if you remember when Mr. Luthuli was explaining, Mr. Luthuli indicated that prior to 2012, the fund used to receive a leg file or information from Eskom that included people who were limited duration, who were on limited duration contract. The fund had technical problems because the system used to kick out those people. The fund then agreed with Eskom. In 2013, they agreed on the codes, right? On all the relevant codes to try and eliminate a possibility of including people who are not eligible to the fund. On the with the understanding that both parties understood that now from 2013 onwards, we are not going to receive any files that have got people who are limited duration. And if you remember, Mr. Luthuli said we operate on a level of trust with the employer. Remember, we are called Eskom Pension and Provident Fund. We could have been Alexander Forbes, we could have been Sanlam, we could have been any other administrator in the case of your government employee. You could have been Japa, for instance. And you have an agreement with the employer to provide you with the right information. And from a certain date onwards, you have a meeting, you agree from now onwards, everything's going to be done properly. And then suddenly you receive leg files. You have to rely, if you are operating on a basis of trust, that what you are given is correct. You cannot operate on it. Now that we know, as you know, we have gone back to them and asked them, do you have any other people that you have given to us today who are members of our fund and yet they are on a limited duration contract? That's the corrective action we have taken.
Members, I just want to make a comment. I am very worried about, Mr. Luthuli might say their governance is up to scratch and it's up to date. I'm worried about the Eskom pension fund because it will work for the executive. But I'm worried about a sweeper or a cleaner at Eskom who worked for 1 year or 2 years in Eskom. If there is anything that Eskom would ever be able to work out with the pension fund, for that lame person who does not have anything, because Mr. Molefe was an honorable member in parliament, and he was getting a salary or a pension payout of 100 and something thousand, and a payment from parliament. I am really worried about the situation that we find ourselves in, because we've got a constitution in South Africa that we need to respect. We have policies of the government that we need to respect. Eskom is a state-owned company which gets money from the state or from the government. If there is this mismanagement or misappropriations of funds that are getting this way, I'm really worried, honorable members. I have only 15 minutes left, but I will allow you, honorable members, to have one short question. One very, 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 very short question, up to 5 to 2. At 2 o'clock, I'm adjourning the meeting. Mr. Swart, Mr. Shivambo, and Mr. Is Shivambo the name or the surname? and Mr. Luyenge. One straightforward question, please. If it's answered not to your satisfaction, then it's answered. And Mr. Swart, after you, it's going to be Ms. Nobanda.
Thank you, Chair. Are you aware of any criminal investigation against Eskom for the misrepresentation that they made to you? Remember last year, Mr. Gordon was charged for the early retirement of Mr. Ivan Pillay. Now, he was a 56-year-old, he was a government employees pension fund member, and the amount in dispute was less than 1.1 million. And we know that there was a charges laid, spurious charges, but they were withdrawn. From the information you're giving us, it would appear that there is a serious misrepresentation that was made to you. And we know that misrepresentation forms the basis of a fraud charge because you acted on the basis of that misrepresentation to the detriment of the pension fund. So are you aware of any criminal action that has been instituted or that is being investigated? And if so, would you cooperate with such an investigation? Thank you.
We have been contacted by the Hawks where they indicated that they would like to engage with us to gain more information around the circumstances of Mr. Molefe's pension payout. We indicated to the Hawks that the fund is more than willing to participate in that process. We have not heard from them yet. They were supposed to come back to us to finalize a meeting date. We have not heard from them as yet.
FBI will phone you as well.
Can you give me, Honorable Nobani?
Thank you, Chair. Mine is not a question, it's more of to note. I didn't hear you mentioning it on your remarks, the information we request of any other executives if they've been paid out. Remember, you've asked them to give to us.
Not only that, everything that has been asked by the committee members, I'm not sure if there is anyone who noted them, but there should be somebody who's noting them and should give us that information. Thank you.
No, I agree with the observation that the Eskom pension fund is somehow being used as a platform to either launder money or to move money illegally to individuals. Like, even if the rules permit, I mean, how do you agree to give someone 30 million? Like, even if they've deposited into your account, how do you willingly cooperate on commission of crime? And I think that is one thing that we should note as part of analyzing of this report, that something should have, like a red alarm a red flag should have been raised immediately. You are told that no, transfer 30 million rand as pension funds, and even if your calculation permits you that, like Section 28, 21.4, and everything else, it was decidedly wrong. And I think it speaks to the ethical conduct and standing of the leadership of the pension fund in terms of those that got to implement that. The question which I want to ask, which is not maybe directly related to this, is when you introduced people, you said the person sitting behind you is Advocate Menete. The person behind you. Yes. Is he the same one who was nominated by Machela Kuku to be the chairperson of the disciplinary hearing of Eskom now, in his disciplinary hearing? Maybe you can check that, and what is his role in the pension fund, and why did Machela Kuku choose him to preside over his DC? Maybe these conflictual issues are part of this problem that we're dealing with.
Can we allow him to answer?
Thanks, Chairperson, for the opportunity. I didn't anticipate that I would be asked a question like this, but I'm happy that I'm asked. Like I'm a member of the Johannesburg Bar. I practice as a member in the courts in this country. And if I'm called and asked whether I'm available to provide legal services, if I'm not conflicted and I'm available, I accept. I have acted for many people and many institutions. I was called to ask whether I'm available to be appointed as a chairperson of a disciplinary inquiry for Eskom, which I accepted, and because I was not conflicted and I had availability, and I gave the dates when I was available. In the week before the hearing could start, I received information that it was going to start earlier, but it was at a time when I would not have been available to be the chairperson, and it was on that basis that I became unavailable. I don't know how I got nominated. I was called by an attorney, Mr. Mkunu Attorneys, who asked whether I was available. I wasn't asked by Mr. Koko or by any particular individual at Eskom. I have no interest in Eskom. I have no interest in Eskom pension funds. I'm acting in this matter on the instructions of Norton Rose, instructed by Ms. Michelle David, because also I was available both because I'm not conflicted and I have the time to do the work. And that is the professional basis on which I render services. I've rendered services for the National Assembly and other people.
And you know, comrades, this outsourcing thing is a real problem. Not only where you are, but also in a number of other places. In government. Many of the things that we do in government are outsourced. And they must now be insourced. We want those tasks to be brought back to government. Because, comrades, you know, outsourcing.
If you don't declare your full kind of emotion as it relates to this kind of a mistake. Yeah, I think firstly, I would have to differ with the fact that there was, any deliberate mistake. As a fund, we followed the rules of the fund. And there is a framework, the legal framework that we can operate within. We did not make the decisions. The decisions were made by the employer, rightfully so, and they approached the fund saying these are the decisions that they've made. And from our responsibility is to make sure that the fund is a financially sustainable and viable entity, that the members of the fund are protected. And I think by us saying to the employer, here is the cost of what you want to achieve, we were fulfilling that responsibility. it becomes difficult to then put myself or put ourselves as a fund in the shoes of the employer, because we do not know up to this day what informed their decisions, what governance processes they went through. We can only reflect upon what we did, and I think we've been very transparent in terms of our submission. We've been very detailed, we've been very transparent. We've also highlighted where there's been shortcomings on us as a fund. For example, the issue of the delegation of discretion. When that was highlighted, immediately there was corrective steps that were taken that such matters must go to the board. We've addressed Eskom to try and make sure that going forward we get the correct information, and we've asked in terms of other members, including specifically Mr. Singh, as to his status of employment so that we can take corrective action. And we are looking at the rules with the aim of saying, how can we make sure that these rules are robust enough to deal with the issues? So I sincerely believe that we have not deliberately gone out to do something that is not correct, that is not appropriate. I do not believe that our governance has failed us. I do not believe that our ethics in any way have been compromised. The fund has got very ethical employees that work at the fund, dedicate themselves to the fund to make sure that on a daily basis we provide pensioners and members with a service that they require. But we are taking lessons from all of this that has happened, and corrective action has already started.
Honorable Mazone,
Chair, thank you. Given what has just been said, and you are very confident of the ethical level that your company operates within, I'm therefore left with no other reasonable way of seeing it other than the fact that Eskom acted in an unethical fashion because you were given the incorrect information. Do you share my opinion that Eskom, in their interactions with you, behaved unethically? And if not, why not?
Again, I would indicate that it becomes difficult to speculate around what happened and what did not happen at Eskom. I think probably Eskom would be in a better position to indicate that. But from our side, where we've picked up discrepancies in terms of information that Eskom has given us, we've taken it up, we've gone back to them, and we do hope that going forward, there's going to be corrective action to make sure that information flow that is coming to the fund is correct and appropriate.
thank you very much, honorable members, and thank you for the response and the presentation from the Eskom Pension Fund. We might not have understood some of the information, or we might not have agreed on the information, but we have the information. Then we will work on that information when we get to call Eskom itself. But I just wanted to caution the members or the board to just look again at your rules and check what you have learned out of this process and out of the process that you were involved in with Eskom, and maybe there are things that you need to change. Honorable members, to the media, our friends, our best friends, to the officials that are inside this this room, thank you very much for being with us in this road. Thank you very much from the pension fund of Eskom and our officials. This has brought us to the end of our meeting, but what I want to say here is that next week, we will be looking at our our work as a committee. This is part of our work, but we look at our daily work as a committee next week. We will not have any inquiry next week. We will just look at what we have to do and present in Parliament before the end of the year. Thank you very much to everybody. The meeting stands adjourned.
This one doesn't even work.